Your silence after his rejection is killing him, ladies. Let's talk about something deliciously ironic. He rejected you. Maybe not rudely, maybe not coldly. Maybe he said something like, "I'm just not ready for something serious." Or maybe he ghosted, hoping you'd quietly fade into the background like a polite memory. But what he didn't count on was your silence. You didn't beg, you didn't chase. You didn't even follow up, you disappeared. And now he's haunted by your absence. Because silence is power. See, most people expect a reaction. Drama, a long text, a tearful confession. But when you give him nothing, he's forced to sit with the echo of his own decision. And that echo gets loud. He starts to wonder, wait, was she actually okay with this? Then it becomes, did I lose something I didn't even take time to understand? And eventually, why the hell isn't she trying to prove her worth to me? That's the moment. That's when the power dynamic flips. Your silence isn't passive, it's strategic. It's the loudest "I respect myself" you'll ever speak. Now let me be clear, this isn't about playing games. It's not revenge. It's about not participating in someone's indecision. You're not punishing him. You're prioritizing you. You're showing him and the world that your value doesn't shrink just because someone couldn't see it. So stay quiet, stay radiant, stay moving forward. Because trust me, while he's lying awake replaying your last smile, you'll be out there becoming even harder to replace. When someone rejects you, the natural urge is often to respond, to ask why, to clarify, to express hurt, or to somehow reclaim control of the situation. But what most people don't realize is that silence in the aftermath of rejection isn't passive, it's incredibly powerful. In fact, silence often says more than any explanation, argument, or plea ever could. When you say nothing, you don't just disappear from the moment you plant a seed of uncertainty in the mind of the person who rejected you. Rejection typically comes with a subtle expectation. Even if it's done kindly, the person often anticipates that you'll linger, reach out, or try to change their mind. That expectation feeds their ego. It confirms that they had some control over your emotions, that they were the prize, and that you're still orbiting around their attention. But when you offer nothing, no response, no follow-up, no attempt to stay friends, it disrupts the script they thought they were writing. That disruption is jarring. It forces them to sit in the full weight of their own choice. This silence becomes a mirror. In the absence of your voice, they're left alone with their thoughts. And instead of being soothed by your continued presence or reassured by your attempts to reconnect, they begin to feel the sting of distance. Suddenly, the thing they felt so sure about rejecting you feels less satisfying. It doesn't give them the ego boost they expected. Instead, they start to question, why didn't she react? Was she less invested than I thought? Did I misread the situation? That curiosity quickly turns into confusion, and confusion into regret. You see, most people don't miss the person, they miss the attention. They miss the certainty of being wanted. And your silence takes that certainty away. It creates space for doubt. And that doubt can grow louder than any words you might have said. It's in that silence that he starts to realize your absence, not just physically, but emotionally. Not just in conversation, but in energy. And that's when the tables start to turn. What makes silence so effective is that it doesn't come with emotional labor. It's not fueled by anger or bitterness. It's not about ghosting to hurt someone. It's simply about refusing to chase someone who made it clear they weren't choosing you. That's where the power lies. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not waiting for them to come back. You're just gone, and that calm removal, that quiet strength, can be more unsettling than any confrontation. He may never tell you. He may never show it. But somewhere in his thoughts, in his moments of reflection, he'll feel it, the strange emptiness where your presence used to be. And in that space, your silence will speak the loudest truth. You respected yourself enough to walk away without needing permission. When someone rejects you, they often expect a script to follow. It's the one they've seen before or maybe even played out themselves. You get upset, you try to understand why, you ask if there's something you could have done. They anticipate some kind of emotional response because for most people, rejection triggers a natural need to resolve the discomfort. This expectation isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's subconscious, but either way, it creates a dynamic where they remain in control and you're left reacting. But when you give them nothing, when you break that pattern and stay silent, you create a moment they didn't plan for. That silence hits differently. It makes them uncomfortable not because you've been cruel, but because you've taken away the emotional confirmation they were expecting. Most people want to feel wanted even when they don't want to reciprocate it. Rejection becomes easier when it's met with tears or pleas or even polite hurt. That way, they still get to feel powerful even if they're walking away. Your reaction reassures them that they mattered. So when you don't react, when you don't even flinch suddenly, they don't get to be the hero in the story. They don't get to feel noble for letting you down easy. They don't get closure. What they get instead is silence, and that silence is unnerving because it shifts the emotional labor back to them. Instead of comforting you or witnessing your pain, now they're left wondering if maybe you weren't as attached as they thought. Maybe they misjudged your feelings. Maybe they didn't hold as much importance in your life as they assumed. That moment where the expected reaction doesn't arrive is what makes silence such a powerful move. It's not about revenge or coldness. It's about removing yourself from the dynamic entirely. It's about refusing to perform grief for someone who already made a decision to exclude you from their future. You're not playing hard to get. You're simply not playing. There's also something incredibly unsettling about silence because it forces a person to face their decision without external feedback. They don't get to gauge your response, they don't get to feel justified, and they definitely don't get to lean on your emotional reaction to make themselves feel better. They're just left with the raw, unfiltered result of what they chose, and that, more than anything, can start to gnaw at them. When you break the pattern of reacting to rejection, you turn the situation inward for them. You hold up a mirror they didn't want to look into. It creates a gap between their choice and its emotional impact, and often, in that space, regret begins to bloom. That's the beauty of unpredictability. When you don't follow the typical script, you stop being just another person they let go of. You become the one who responded with dignity, mystery, and strength, and that's unforgettable. Disappearing after being rejected is so often misunderstood. People assume it's an act of weakness, of giving up, of not being able to face the pain or have a mature conversation. But the truth is, choosing to disappear quietly, confidently, without fuss is one of the strongest things you can do. It's not avoidance. It's not cowardice. It's self-respect in action. And it takes far more strength to walk away in silence than it does to keep reaching out for someone who already told you they're not choosing you. Staying in someone's life after they've rejected you can feel like a way to stay close, to preserve something, to prove your worth. But what you're really doing is softening the boundary they just drew. You're allowing them to keep you in their life on their terms, not yours. And when you do that, you're putting your value up for negotiation, offering continued presence in exchange for nothing. That's not strength. That's settling. Disappearing is a decision. It's not running away, it's walking away with intention. It's understanding that someone's rejection of you is not an invitation to try harder at information. It's clarity, and clarity deserves a response rooted in self-worth, not desperation. When you remove yourself completely, you're not punishing the other person. You're saying, thank you for the honesty. I now know where you stand, and I have no interest in lingering where I'm not fully wanted. It also signals emotional discipline. Anyone can lash out. Anyone can send a string off. Texts asking for explanation or closure, but choosing stillness instead of noise shows you have control. You don't need to be seen hurting to prove that you cared. You don't need to narrate your pain for it to be valid. Instead, you respect yourself enough to process your emotions privately and keep your energy intact. That kind of quiet exit doesn't scream insecurity, it reflects confidence. Confidence that you're still valuable even when someone doesn't see it. Confidence that you don't need their validation to heal or move on. Confidence that love isn't something you chase, it's something that finds you when you're grounded in your own worth. It's also a sign of maturity. When you disappear after rejection, you're not trying to control the outcome. You're accepting what is without trying to manipulate it into something else. You're letting things unfold as they're meant to, rather than clinging to someone who's already shown you they're not ready or willing to meet you where you are. Ultimately, disappearing sends a message that words never could. It tells the world and yourself that you don't beg to be kept. You don't linger in places where love is conditional. You move, you grow. And you do it without applause, without performance, without needing to be seen. Because your worth isn't proven by how loudly you react, it's shown in how gracefully you let go. Your absence speaks louder than any message you could have sent. It communicates something that no carefully worded text or emotional conversation covers. It says clearly and powerfully, I am not someone who waits around to be chosen. I am someone who walks away when I am not. And that message echoes in a way your presence never could. When you go silent, when you pull your energy back and truly detach, the void you leave behind becomes impossible to ignore. That absence becomes its own presence. You see, when you're consistently showing up, texting, calling, or just being emotionally available, even after rejection, you're offering a type of comfort. You're cushioning the loss for the other person. They don't have to feel the full weight of their decision because you're still there, emotionally lingering in the background. But when you step away, truly and completely, they start to feel the contrast. They feel what life is like without your attention, without your support, without your energy. And that contrast is powerful. It's often not until your presence is gone that someone begins to realize what it meant. Maybe they took your kindness for granted. Maybe they assumed you'd always be there. Maybe they didn't fully recognize the value of your emotional investment until it was no longer being offered. That's the power of absence. It forces reflection. It invites them to sit with the silence and wonder what they lost. And your absence doesn't just speak to them, it speaks to you too. It reminds you of your strength. It shows you that you're capable of walking away even when it hurts, that you don't have to fight for someone's attention or affection, that your value isn't determined by their acceptance. When you stop chasing, when you stop showing up where you're no longer being welcomed, you begin to reclaim your energy. You start redirecting that energy back into yourself, into your healing, your growth, your future. In a world where people are constantly reacting, constantly seeking closure or validation, your silence becomes a signal of deep confidence. You're not looking for external approval to feel whole. You're not asking someone else to help you understand your worth. You already know. And so you leave without noise, without theatrics, and that kind of exit is unforgettable. People remember the ones who respected themselves enough to leave with grace. They remember the ones who didn't beg or chase or try to prove something. The absence you leave behind becomes a reminder of what they lost, even if they couldn't see it at the time. It becomes the space where they finally understand what your presence truly meant. When you go silent, you're not disappearing. You're making room for yourself, for better things, and for people who see your value without needing to lose it first. And in doing that, your absence becomes one of the most powerful things you can offer, not as punishment, but as proof that you know exactly what you deserve. There's a big difference between silence and manipulation, and it's important to understand that. Choosing not to respond after being rejected isn't about playing games. It's not about trying to make the other person feel guilty or hoping that your silence will somehow force them to come crawling back. It's not a strategy to trick someone into wanting you again. It's simply choosing not to participate in a situation that has already shown you it doesn't serve your worth. When someone tells you they don't want a relationship, or they're unsure, or they're not ready, that's a boundary. And your silence is just you honoring that boundary, not trying to twist it. It's easy to confuse emotional detachment with manipulation in today's dating culture. So many people are used to attention equaling interest and silence equaling punishment. But silence, when rooted in self-respect, is none of those things. It's the refusal to beg for crumbs. It's the decision to not fight for a spot in someone's life when they've already made it clear that they're not offering one. You're not withdrawing to provoke a reaction. You're stepping back because there's no longer anything left to say. There's a quiet dignity in not forcing conversations that aren't being invited. There's power in choosing to walk away when your heart wants to stay, but your self-worth demands more. That's not manipulation, that's maturity. It's understanding that your presence is not a bargaining chip. It's a gift. And if someone chooses to reject that gift, they lose access to it. Plain and simple. Some people will interpret your silence as coldness. They'll wonder why you didn't at least try to stay friends, or why you didn't offer one last text of closure. But you're not obligated to offer emotional labor to someone who's no longer investing in you. The expectation that you should do so is, in itself, a kind of manipulation. It assumes that your emotional availability should remain open even after they've turned you away. That's not fairness, that's entitlement. By removing yourself from that space entirely, you protect your energy. You stop allowing yourself to be an option. You stop negotiating your value with someone who already showed you they couldn't meet it. That's not punishment, it's a boundary. And it sends a clear message: if you're not in, I'm out. And here's the truth: when you leave with quiet resolve instead of dramatic exits, people feel it more deeply. Not because you're trying to make them, but because they're not used to it. They're used to people chasing, trying and explaining. But when you offer none of that, when you don't try to be remembered, you are. Not because of strategy, but because authenticity always leaves a mark. You're not trying to win. You're just refusing to lose yourself in someone else's confusion. And that, more than anything, shows how firmly you stand in your own power. When you go silent after someone rejects you, something unexpected happens. You gain the upper hand. Not because you're playing a game or trying to win, but because you've reclaimed control over your energy. In that moment of rejection, the other person assumed they had the final say, the last word. They thought their decision would define the outcome, but your silence takes that power back. It shifts the narrative from what they decided about you to what you decided to no longer tolerate. That shift is everything. There's a quiet authority that comes with not responding. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It's calm, still, and unshakable. While the person who rejected you might have expected you to linger. reach out, or stay emotionally entangled, your silence cuts the cord. It tells them you're no longer available for confusion, half commitments, or mixed signals. You're not going to hang around and hope they change their mind. You've already made the decision they weren't brave enough to make for themselves, to walk away fully. And the reason this puts you in the stronger position is simple. You're not trying to get something from them anymore. You've closed the door with grace and moved forward. That's rare. Most people fear that silence means the other person won't come back, that it's the end. But sometimes it's your absence, not your effort, that makes someone realize what they had. Because silence gives them space to wonder, to feel, to reflect. And in that space, the story they told themselves about you starts to shift. They might have thought you'd always be there, that you'd try to prove your worth, or that you'd wait until they were ready. But instead, they're met with nothing. No call, no text, no trace of you hanging around, and that nothingness becomes loud. It turns into a presence of its own, the presence of someone who values herself enough not to chase. That's when their mind starts to spiral. Why didn't she try to fix it? Was she less invested than I thought? Did I make a mistake? And maybe they won't come back, maybe they will, but either way, you're not waiting. That's the beauty of silence. It's not a pause, it's a pivot. It doesn't trap you in indecision, it frees you from it. While they're still replaying the last moment, wondering if they misjudged the situation, you've already redirected your focus. You've started to heal, grow, and reinvest in yourself. The strength of silence lies in its ability to say, I do not beg, I do not plead, I do not stay where I'm not wanted, and that unspoken message lingers longer than any emotional outburst ever could. It reminds them that while they were deciding if you were enough, you were deciding not to wait around for their answer. And whether or not they ever say it out loud, they'll remember that. Because power isn't in proving your worth, it's in never needing to. So if you've ever found yourself questioning whether your silence after rejection matters, know this, it absolutely does. Your silence is not emptiness, it is strength, it is clarity, it is self-respect in its purest form. It says what words often fail to. It says, I heard you, and I'm not going to fight to stay where I'm not chosen. And in doing that, you shift the power back to where it always belonged, with you. You're not walking away because you're weak. You're walking away because you've decided your peace, your dignity, and your energy are worth more than convincing someone to see your value. And in that quiet withdrawal, you don't just leave a gap, you leave a message, one they'll feel long after the words have stopped. So keep your silence. Let it speak volumes. Let it echo in the places you once filled with presence, love, and effort. You don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes the loudest thing you can ever say is nothing. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for honoring your worth enough to hear this through. Remember, love that must be begged for isn't love, it's survival. And you were not made to survive someone's uncertainty. You were made to thrive in certainty, in truth, and in mutual, unwavering love. Take care of your heart, protect your energy, and never forget the quiet power you hold when you simply choose to walk away. Thank you and goodbye.